You won't believe what happened when this hero rescued a starving bear cub. What started as a daring rescue turned into an unbelievable display of gratitude from a powerful mother bear. Prepare to be moved by a bond so profound it redefines everything you thought you knew about humans and wildlife. But to understand why this moment is so extraordinary, we need to go back to where it all began. 3 weeks earlier, on a cold October morning in the Canadian wilderness. Before we start, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications to catch more heartwarming stories like this one. Trust me, you won't want to miss what unfolds in the next few minutes. Meet Marcus Thompson, a 34-year-old wildlife photographer from British Columbia. Marcus isn't your typical photographer. He spent the last decade documenting the secret lives of North American wildlife, often camping alone for weeks in the most remote corners of the wilderness. His camera has captured everything from the first steps of mountain goat kids to the majestic dance of migrating caribou. But nothing could have prepared him for what he was about to encounter on this particular morning. Marcus had been tracking a family of black bears for his latest documentary project about wildlife behavior in changing seasons. For days, he'd been following them at a respectful distance, capturing stunning footage of their daily routines. The family consisted of a magnificent mother bear, let's call her Luna, and her twin cubs, born just 8 months earlier. Luna was everything you'd expect from a mother bear: fierce, protective, and incredibly intelligent. She'd guide her cubs to the best berry patches, teach them which streams had the fattest salmon, and constantly scan the horizon for any threats. The cubs, one slightly larger than the other, were bundles of energy, wrestling with each other, climbing trees that were far too tall for their skill level, and learning the art of being a bear through trial and plenty of error. Marcus had grown fond of watching this little family. Through his telephoto lens, he'd witnessed tender moments that most humans never get to see. Luna gently grooming her cubs, the babies nursing while she kept watch, and their playful antics that would make anyone smile. But then, something changed. On October 15th, Marcus noticed something was wrong. Through his binoculars, he could see only one cub with Luna. The smaller one, the one that had always been just a step behind his brother, was nowhere to be seen. At first, Marcus thought maybe the cub was just exploring nearby, or perhaps sleeping in a hidden spot. But as hours turned to days, it became clear that something terrible had happened. Luna's behavior confirmed his worst fears. She'd stopped her normal foraging routine and began retracing their steps, calling out with soft, mournful sounds that seemed to echo through the entire forest. She was looking for her missing baby. Marcus found himself torn between professional distance and growing concern. He'd spent years documenting wildlife, and he knew that nature could be cruel. Cubs don't always survive their first winter. Predators, accidents, illness, there are countless dangers in the wild. But watching Luna's desperate search was heartbreaking. Then, on the 4th day, Marcus heard it. It was barely audible at first, a weak, pitiful cry coming from somewhere deep in a rocky ravine about a half-mile from where he'd last seen the complete family. The sound was so faint that Marcus initially thought he was imagining it, but as he moved closer, following the sound with his equipment, the cries became unmistakable. It was the missing cub. What Marcus discovered when he finally located the source of the crying will haunt him for the rest of his life. The little cub, barely 20 pounds and covered in matted fur, had somehow fallen into a narrow crevice between two large boulders. The gap was too narrow for Luna to reach him, but just wide enough that the cub couldn't climb out on his own. The baby bear had been trapped for 4 days. 4 days without food, 4 days without water, 4 days crying for his mother who couldn't reach him. Marcus immediately understood the horrible predicament. The cub was dying. His cries were getting weaker by the hour, and it was clear he had maybe hours left, not days. Meanwhile, somewhere above, Luna was still searching, still calling, unaware that her baby was trapped just yards away, but might as well have been on another planet. The professional photographer in Marcus knew he should document this tragic scene and let nature take its course. This was the wild, after all. Intervention wasn't supposed to be part of his job. But the human being in Marcus couldn't walk away. Standing at the edge of that ravine, Marcus faced an impossible choice. Everything in his training told him not to interfere. Wildlife photographers are supposed to be invisible observers, not participants. Getting involved could disrupt natural behavior, create dependency, or even make things worse. But this wasn't about disrupting natural behavior. This was about a freak accident, a tragic circumstance that had nothing to do with natural selection or survival of the fittest. This was simply a baby who had fallen into a hole and couldn't get out. Marcus spent agonizing hours weighing his options. He tried calling wildlife authorities, but they were hours away, and the cub clearly didn't have hours left. He considered trying to guide Luna to the location, but black bears can be unpredictable, especially stressed mothers, and he might end up making the situation more dangerous for everyone. As the sun began to set on what might be the cub's last day, Marcus made his decision. He was going down into that ravine. What happened next tested every ounce of Marcus's outdoor skills and courage. The rocky crevice was treacherous, loose stones, sharp edges, and barely enough room for a grown man to maneuver. One wrong move could send him tumbling down to join the trapped cub, potentially making the situation even worse. But Marcus had rock climbing experience from his photography expeditions, and he'd packed rope and basic rescue gear. Slowly, carefully, he rappelled down into the narrow space, talking softly to the terrified cub the whole time. "Hey there, little guy. I know you're scared. I know you want your mama. We're going to get you back to her, okay?" The cub's reaction was heartbreaking. The baby was so weak he could barely lift his head, but his eyes, those beautiful, innocent brown eyes, locked onto Marcus with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. The cub didn't try to run or fight. He seemed to understand, somehow, that this strange creature rappelling into his prison might be his only chance at survival. Getting down to the cub was only half the challenge. Getting both of them back up safely would require every bit of Marcus's ingenuity.
The moment their species connected, human skin touching wild fur was electric. The cub didn't pull away. Instead, he actually moved closer, as if recognizing that this was his lifeline. "That's it, buddy," Marcus whispered, his voice cracking with emotion. "We're going to get you out of here." Marcus carefully wrapped the cub in his jacket, creating a secure sling that would protect the baby during the ascent. The cub, exhausted and weak, didn't struggle. He seemed to surrender completely to Marcus's care, trusting this stranger with his life. The climb up was terrifying. Every loose stone could have meant disaster. Every gust of wind threatened to throw them off balance. But inch by inch, foot by foot, Marcus climbed toward daylight, carrying his precious cargo. When they finally emerged from the crevice, both of them were exhausted, scratched, and covered in rock dust. But they were alive. They were free. And that's when Marcus realized his biggest challenge was still ahead of him. Now he had a baby bear, a wild baby bear who belonged with his mother. A mother who was somewhere out there in hundreds of square miles of wilderness, still searching for her lost child. Marcus knew he might have a few hours before the cub would need food and water desperately. He also knew that hand-feeding a wild bear cub, even in an emergency, could create dangerous dependency behaviors. The only acceptable outcome was reuniting this baby with Luna. But how do you find one specific bear in the vast Canadian wilderness? Marcus had one advantage. He'd been tracking this family for weeks. He knew their patterns, their favorite spots, their travel routes. If Luna was still in the area, he had a good idea where she might be. Carrying the cub in his improvised sling, Marcus began the most important tracking mission of his life. He followed game trails, checked water sources, and listened constantly for Luna's distinctive calls. The cub, meanwhile, seemed to understand the urgency. Despite his ordeal, he began making soft sounds, the kind of vocalizations bear cubs use to communicate with their mothers. It was as if he was trying to help Marcus find Luna. For 6 hours, Marcus hiked through increasingly rough terrain, following every possible lead. His cameras and equipment weighed him down, but he couldn't abandon thousands of dollars of gear in bear country. The cub grew heavier with each mile, but Marcus never considered leaving him behind or giving up. As afternoon faded to evening, Marcus began to worry. Bears are most active during dawn and dusk, but they also travel great distances. Luna could be miles away by now, possibly having given up her search and moved on with her surviving cub. Just as despair began to creep in, Marcus heard something that made his heart leap. A bear call. Deep, resonant, unmistakably maternal. Luna was close. Following the sound, Marcus moved as quietly as possible through the underbrush. The last thing he wanted was to startle an already stressed mother bear while carrying her cub. Black bears aren't typically aggressive toward humans, but a mother who's lost a baby is not a typical black bear. Through a gap in the trees, Marcus finally spotted her. Luna was magnificent and heartbreaking at the same time. Her powerful frame was silhouetted against the setting sun as she stood on her hind legs, scanning the forest and calling for her missing baby. Her remaining cubs sat nearby, looking small and confused. Marcus faced another crucial decision. How do you approach a wild mother bear to return her baby? There's no protocol for this situation, no guidebook for bear-cub repatriation. He decided to trust in the power of a mother's instinct. Staying about 50 yards away, Marcus gently placed the cub on the ground and stepped back. Then he did something that could have gotten him killed. He made eye contact with Luna and slowly backed away, his hands raised to show he meant no harm. The cub, smelling his family and sensing his mother's presence, began crying out with renewed energy. This is the moment we opened with, the moment that will give you chills. Luna heard her baby's cry and turned toward the sound. When she saw the tiny figure on the forest floor, she immediately began charging in their direction. But she also saw Marcus, a human male who appeared to be threatening her recovered cub. In Luna's mind, this had to be a trap. Humans near her babies meant danger. So she charged, 400 pounds of protective fury, covering the ground between them in massive bounds, her eyes locked on Marcus. Marcus had nowhere to run. The forest was too thick, and Luna was too fast. This was it. This was how his story would end. Killed trying to do the right thing. But then something extraordinary happened. Just feet before impact, Luna suddenly stopped. She had caught her cub's scent on Marcus. In that split second, this incredible mother bear realized what had happened. She could smell her baby on this human. She could see that her cub was unharmed, clean, and cared for. Her powerful animal instincts told her a story that defied everything she'd been programmed to believe about the relationship between humans and bears. This human had helped her baby. What Luna did next will be burned into Marcus's memory forever. Instead of attacking, Luna slowly approached Marcus. She stopped just feet away and sat down. Then she did something that wildlife experts said they'd never documented before in the wild. She bowed her head toward him. It lasted only a few seconds, but in that moment, Marcus witnessed something that bridged the gap between species. Luna was thanking him. A wild mother bear was expressing gratitude to a human who had saved her child. Then, as if nothing extraordinary had happened, Luna walked over to her recovered cub, gently picked him up in her mouth, and carried him to where her other baby waited. The family was whole again. Marcus stood in that forest clearing as the sun set, watching Luna systematically check her recovered cub for injuries while her other baby played nearby. The little family that had been broken was healing right before his eyes. Later, wildlife experts who reviewed Marcus's footage of the encounter confirmed several remarkable things. First, they'd never seen a wild black bear display such clear recognition and apparent gratitude toward a human. Second, the cub showed no signs of trauma or dependency after his rescue. He immediately readjusted to wild behavior as if the rescue had never happened. But perhaps most remarkably, Luna's behavior toward Marcus changed permanently. For the remaining weeks that he documented the family, Luna would acknowledge his presence with what could only be described as calm acceptance. She no longer saw him as a threat. She had reclassified him as something different, something safe.
Marcus eventually finished his documentary project, but he never forgot those moments in the forest. The footage he captured of the reunion, the charge, the stop, the bow, became one of the most viewed wildlife videos of the year. But this story is about more than just one man and one bear family. It's about the connections that exist between all living things. Connections that transcend species barriers and challenge our assumptions about the natural world. Marcus's decision to intervene wasn't just about saving one small life, though that would have been reason enough. It was about recognizing that sometimes being human means using our unique capabilities to heal rather than harm, to help rather than exploit. Luna's response teaches us something equally profound. Animals are not just instinct-driven machines. They're capable of recognition, memory, and yes, even something that looks remarkably like gratitude. The natural world is far more complex, far more emotionally rich than we often give it credit for. Marcus's rescue had ripple effects that extended far beyond that October day. His documentation of the incident helped wildlife researchers better understand black bear family dynamics and communication. The footage was used in educational programs to teach people about appropriate wildlife interaction, when to intervene, and when to observe. More importantly, Marcus's story inspired others. Wildlife rehabilitation centers reported increased volunteer applications and donations. Other photographers and outdoors people began carrying basic rescue equipment and training in case they encountered similar situations. The little cub, meanwhile, thrived. Marcus continued to document the family through their winter preparation and confirmed that all three bears successfully entered hibernation. When spring came, he was able to verify that Luna and both cubs had survived the winter and were healthy and active. Stories like this one are becoming more important as human development continues to encroach on wildlife habitat. Bears, like many large mammals, are facing increasing pressure from habitat loss, climate change, and human activity. Every year, hundreds of bear cubs become orphaned or separated from their mothers due to vehicle strikes, hunting, or habitat destruction. Most of these situations don't have happy endings. Wildlife rehabilitation is expensive and time-consuming, and reintroduction to the wild isn't always successful. Marcus's story shows us that sometimes the solution isn't complex infrastructure or million-dollar programs.
Sometimes it's just one person making a conscious choice to help, combined with the remarkable resilience and wisdom of nature itself. For Marcus, the experience changed everything. He still works as a wildlife photographer, but his approach has evolved. He now partners with conservation organizations, using his images and stories to raise awareness about wildlife protection. "I used to think my job was just to document," Marcus said in a recent interview. "But that day with Luna taught me that sometimes documentation isn't enough. Sometimes you have to participate in the story you're telling." Marcus has never had another encounter quite like his experience with Luna, but he credits that day with teaching him that the line between observer and participant isn't always as clear as we think it should be. Luna and Marcus's story offers lessons that extend far beyond wildlife photography or bear behavior. It's about courage, the courage to act when action is needed, even when the outcome is uncertain. It's about compassion, recognizing suffering and responding to it, regardless of species barriers. It's also about trust, the trust that cub placed in Marcus during those terrifying moments in the crevice, and the trust Luna ultimately placed in him when she could have chosen violence instead of gratitude. But perhaps most importantly, it's about connection. In our increasingly digital, disconnected world, there's something profound about a story that bridges not just the gap between two individuals, but between two entirely different species. The impact of Marcus's rescue continues to spread. Wildlife photographers around the world now carry rescue equipment as standard gear. Bear safety courses include Marcus's story as an example of appropriate emergency intervention. Conservation groups use the footage in fundraising campaigns, showing potential donors that individual actions can make a real difference. Luna's family became minor celebrities in wildlife photography circles, with multiple researchers requesting permission to study the long-term effects of the human-bear interaction. The results have contributed to better understanding of bear intelligence, memory, and social behavior. Most remarkably, similar rescue scenarios have been attempted successfully by other wildlife professionals who were inspired by Marcus's example. While experts still caution that such interventions should be attempted only by experienced individuals in genuine emergency situations, the precedent set by Luna's story has opened new possibilities for human-wildlife cooperation. As I write this, it's been 3 full years since that October rescue. Luna and her family, now fully grown, continue to thrive in their Canadian wilderness home. Marcus has documented their progress through multiple seasons, creating a comprehensive record of their development. The rescued cub, now a healthy young adult bear, shows no signs of his traumatic early experience. He's learned to fish, forage, and survive just like any wild bear. The bond between him and Luna remained strong through his adolescence, and wildlife experts noted no unusual behaviors that could be attributed to his early rescue. Luna, now in her prime, has had another set of cubs. Her latest babies are healthy and active, and she demonstrates the same fierce protective instincts that made her such an effective mother to her first litter. Marcus continues to document her family from a respectful distance, and Luna continues to acknowledge his presence with what can only be described as calm recognition. So what can we learn from Marcus and Luna's extraordinary encounter? What does their story tell us about our relationship with the natural world and our responsibilities as the dominant species on this planet? First, it reminds us that individual actions matter. One person's decision to act with courage and compassion saved a life, reunited a family, and created ripple effects that continue to this day. In a world that often feels too big and too complicated for any individual to make a difference, Marcus's story proves that sometimes the most powerful changes come from simple human decency. Second, it challenges our assumptions about wildlife intelligence and emotion. Luna's apparent expression of gratitude forces us to reconsider what we think we know about animal consciousness and communication. Perhaps the natural world is far more aware, far more emotionally complex than our scientific models have traditionally acknowledged. And finally, it offers hope. In an era of environmental destruction, climate change, and mass extinction, it's easy to feel overwhelmed by the magnitude of the challenges facing wildlife. But Marcus and Luna's story remind us that positive outcomes are still possible. Animals are resilient, ecosystems can heal, and sometimes humans and wildlife can coexist not just peacefully, but cooperatively. The next time you encounter wildlife, whether it's a bear in the forest, a bird in your backyard, or any creature in its natural habitat, remember Luna's story. Remember that behind every wild animal is an individual with its own intelligence, its own family bonds, its own will to survive. And remember that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply choose to help. If Marcus and Luna's story has moved you, consider supporting wildlife conservation efforts in your area. Volunteer with local wildlife rehabilitation centers. Support photographers and filmmakers who document wildlife behavior. Most importantly, make choices in your daily life that protect and preserve wild spaces for future generations of both humans and wildlife. Because somewhere out there, another Luna might need another Marcus. And the next time that moment comes, will you be ready to answer the call? The wild is waiting. The choice is yours. This incredible rescue happened over 3 years ago, but Luna and her family continue to thrive. Marcus's footage has been viewed over 10 million times worldwide, inspiring countless people to take action for wildlife conservation. If this story touched your heart, make sure you're subscribed to our channel and hit that notification bell. We share incredible wildlife stories like this one every week. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that individual actions can change the world one life at a time. What would you have done in Marcus's situation? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video if Luna's story moved you as much as it moved us. Until next time, keep believing in the power of compassion, the intelligence of wildlife, and the incredible connections that bind all living things together.